Imagine the deserts of Egypt in 1922. A silence hangs heavy over the Valley of the Kings as a small excavation team, led by Howard Carter and funded by Lord Carnarvon, digs with little hope left. Years of searching, endless disappointments. But then, on November 4th, something changes. They find a sealed staircase. Step by step, chamber by chamber, the sands of time give way to one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in history, the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun. Inside, treasures beyond imagination lay untouched for over 3,000 years. Golden chariots, jeweled amulets, statues of gods, furniture, and countless objects crafted for the afterlife of a young king who had died far too soon. But among this ocean of treasures, one object stood out, not for its size, not even for its dazzling appearance, but for the mystery it carried. A dagger, a blade shining with unusual brilliance, its handle made of fine gold. To the untrained eye, it was just another ceremonial weapon. But hidden within this dagger was a story that reached far beyond Egypt, far beyond Earth itself. This was no ordinary blade. It was forged from a gift that came not from the earth, but from the sky. Tutankhamun's dagger was made of meteoritic iron. Tutankhamun, the boy king, was barely 18 or 19 years old when he died. His sudden death is still debated. Some suggest illness, some an accident, others even assassination. But no matter the cause, his burial treasures remain a time capsule of ancient beliefs and technology. And within that capsule, the iron dagger is perhaps the most remarkable. Why? Because in 1300 BCE, Egypt was still in the Bronze Age. Bronze, a mix of copper and tin, was the metal of choice. Ironworking had not yet arrived in Egypt. In fact, the Iron Age wouldn't begin until centuries later, around 600 years after Tutankhamun's death. So the question is obvious. How did this young pharaoh end up buried with an advanced iron dagger that shouldn't even have existed in his time? The first suspicions came in the 1960s. Scholars noticed that the dagger S-iron didn't look like ordinary smelted iron. It was too pure, too refined. In ancient Egyptian texts, there was a curious phrase, "Bayenpet," which translates to iron of the sky. To the Egyptians, iron was not mined, it was divine. It fell from the heavens, and the only source for such iron was meteorites. For decades, this remained speculation, until 2016, when scientists finally tested the dagger using a method called X-ray fluorescence spectrometry. This non-invasive technique allowed them to study the blade's composition without damaging it. The results were stunning. The iron contained unusually high levels of nickel and cobalt, precisely the ratio found in meteorites. Ordinary earth iron simply does not have this signature. The debate was over. Tutankhamun's dagger had been forged from a piece of a fallen star. Think about what that means. A blade born in the depths of space, traveling millions of years through the void, slamming into the earth as a blazing fireball, and then carefully shaped by human hands into a dagger fit for a king. For the ancient Egyptians, this wasn't just a weapon, it was a cosmic symbol. To carry a blade made from the heavens was to hold proof of divine authority. Tutankhamun may have been a fragile boy king, but this dagger in his burial chamber sent a powerful message. He was chosen by the gods. But there's another mystery. If Egypt had no iron smelting technology at the time, who forged this dagger? Some historians believe it wasn't made in Egypt at all. Instead, it may have been imported, possibly from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, or the Levant, regions known to have worked meteoritic iron before Egypt did. Supporting this theory is a fascinating detail. In diplomatic letters from that era, an Egyptian queen once asked a foreign ruler for gifts of metal weapons, including an iron dagger. This suggests Egypt valued and imported such rare items rather than producing them themselves. And this is not just about Egypt. Across the world, other civilizations treated meteorite iron as sacred. The Inuit people of Greenland carved tools from the Cape York meteorite, and for them, it was no ordinary stone. It was a gift from the sky. In China, during the Shang dynasty, archaeologists found a dagger axe made of meteoritic iron. The Hittites of Anatolia also worked with it, forging ritual objects that were both practical and symbolic. Everywhere it appeared, meteoritic iron was associated with the heavens, gods, and kings, so Tutankhamun's dagger is not simply a beautiful relic. It's a bridge between Earth and the cosmos, a link between ancient humans and the stars they worshipped. Imagine it, a fragment of a star fallen to Earth, reforged into a royal weapon, buried with a young king, and then rediscovered thousands of years later. Even today, it reminds us that humanity has always looked upward, searching for meaning in the skies. But this dagger is only the beginning, because it is not the only artifact that seems centuries ahead of its time. In another part of the world, buried deep in the ground, lies a sword that defied time itself. A sword so perfectly preserved that even after 2,000 years underground, it gleamed as if newly forged. Scientists called it a miracle, but history calls it the Sword of Goujian, and that is where our journey continues. In 1965, in China's Hubei province, a group of archaeologists were excavating an ancient tomb from the spring and autumn period, nearly 2,500 years ago. The tomb was damp, the air heavy with moisture. Wooden coffins inside had rotted away into fragments, bronze vessels lay covered in a green patina of corrosion, and delicate silk clothing had long since disintegrated into dust. It was the perfect place for history to be lost forever. And yet, as they carefully brushed away centuries of mud and stone, something extraordinary emerged. A sword. A weapon of such brilliance that it left the archaeologists in shock. The blade was pulled from its sheath, and it gleamed, bright, untarnished, sharp. After 2,000 years underground, this sword looked as if it had been forged yesterday. The archaeologists named it the Sword of Goujian. Now let's pause for a moment, because this is not just about finding an old sword. This discovery shook historians and metallurgists worldwide. How could a bronze sword remain perfectly preserved for over 2 millennia in a tomb filled with water and humidity? Every other artifact had decayed, but this one stood against time itself. The sword dates back to around 500 BCE, a time when China was divided into warring states. One of those was the state of Yue, ruled by King Gujian. History remembers him as a cunning and resilient ruler who endured defeat, bided his time in humiliation, and then returned to reclaim his throne with vengeance. The sword discovered in his tomb was likely his personal weapon, a blade that symbolized his rise, his patience, and his victory. The design is breathtaking. The blade is about 55 centimeters long, with intricate dark rhombic patterns etched along its surface. At the handle, 2 concentric circles and delicate turquoise inlays gleam. The guard is covered in blue crystals, and the grip was once wrapped in silk. But the most stunning feature is the inscription running along the blade. 8 ancient Chinese characters carved in gold declare, "King of Yue made this sword for his personal use." That one line connected the weapon directly to King Gujian himself. This was not just a relic, it was a living piece of history. But here is the great mystery. Why didn't it rust? Modern scientists studied the sword and discovered that its makers had achieved something remarkable. The blade wasn't pure bronze. It had been forged with an advanced alloying technique. The surface contained a high concentration of tin, which created a protective coating, essentially making it resistant to corrosion. Even more fascinating, some researchers found traces of sulfur on the blade, suggesting that ancient Chinese smiths may have intentionally treated it with a chemical process to shield it from the environment. Think about that. 2,500 years ago, metallurgists in China had mastered a level of materials science that rivaled modern anti-corrosion technology, a method so effective that it preserved the blade for over 2 millennia. To this day, the sword is still razor-sharp. In fact, when tested in the 1960s, it sliced through a stack of 20 sheets of paper effortlessly. The story of the Sword of Goujian is not only about science, it is about survival. King Gujian's tale is legendary in Chinese history. Defeated by the rival state of Wu, he was captured and forced to live as a servant in his enemy's palace. For years, he suffered humiliation, doing menial tasks, all while secretly plotting his revenge. There's even a famous story that he slept on brushwood and tasted bitter gall every night, to remind himself never to forget his shame. Eventually, he regained power, built up his forces, and crushed his enemies. The sword, resting by his side, became the ultimate symbol of endurance and triumph. But the sword also raises a deeper question. If ancient China had such advanced metallurgy, how much of that knowledge has been lost to history? Modern scientists still debate whether the sulfur coating was intentional or an accidental byproduct of the forging process. Was it a carefully guarded secret of the Yue Kingdom's swordsmiths? Or was it simply a lucky coincidence that made this particular sword immortal? Either way, the fact remains. No other sword from that period has survived in such pristine condition. The Sword of Goujian stands alone, as if time itself chose to preserve it. And it wasn't only about preservation. The craftsmanship, the symmetry, the balance, everything about this weapon shows mastery far beyond its era. Imagine the awe a warrior must have felt drawing this blade, sunlight catching on its mirrored surface, the enemy staring into a weapon that looked as if it had been kissed by the gods. The Sword of Goujian reminds us of something powerful. Civilizations rise and fall, dynasties vanish, but sometimes through sheer genius and artistry, a single object survives to tell their story. Today, the sword rests in a museum in Hubei, carefully preserved and displayed behind glass. Thousands of visitors every year stand before it, marveling at a blade that has endured centuries of war, chaos, and decay. It is not just a weapon. It is a miracle of human achievement, a defiance of time. But just as China preserved secrets of metallurgy, Europe held mysteries of its own. For in the Viking Age, blacksmiths in the cold north were forging weapons that seemed almost magical, swords with inscriptions of strange words, stronger and sharper than anything of their time. They were called the Ulfberht swords. And that is where our story goes next. Imagine walking through the frozen landscapes of northern Europe around the year 900 AD. Snow crunches under your boots, the wind howls across the fjords, and in the distance the silhouette of a Viking longhouse emerges. Inside, a blacksmith hammers tirelessly, sparks flying from his anvil. He is forging something extraordinary. A sword that will outlast time itself, a blade so perfectly balanced, so sharp, that it seems centuries ahead of its age. This is the story of the Ulfberht swords, the legendary weapons that continue to baffle historians, metallurgists, and blacksmiths alike. Over 170 of these swords have been discovered across Europe, from Norway to the Balkans. Each bears the mysterious inscription Ulfberht Plus, a name that has become synonymous with precision, craftsmanship, and technological genius. But the real mystery lies not in the name, but in the steel itself. Modern analysis has revealed that these swords were made from nearly pure crucible steel, an alloy containing 3 times more carbon than typical medieval swords. This meant they were lighter, stronger, and more flexible than anything else in the Viking world. For context, most swords of that time were brittle and prone to breaking in battle. The Ulfberht blades, on the other hand, could slice through other weapons like butter, withstand incredible stress, and maintain a razor-sharp edge that few modern recreations could match. How was this possible? At that time, Europe had no furnaces capable of reaching the temperatures required to make such steel, which exceed 1,600 degrees Celsius. It was as if these swords had been forged by an industrial revolution decades, even centuries before it existed. Some scholars suggest that the secrets of the Ulfberht steel may have come from the East, perhaps Persia, India, or even Central Asia, where advanced metallurgical techniques, including crucible steel production, were already known. Viking traders and raiders may have learned these techniques through long-distance trade, cultural exchange, or conquest, but no definitive records exist. The Ulfberht swords remain a tantalizing glimpse into a lost world of technological knowledge. But it's not just the steel that fascinates researchers, it's the precision. Each sword is perfectly straight, symmetrical and balanced. The inscription Ulfberht Plus itself was stamped into the blade, but not merely for decoration. It served as a mark of quality, a brand indicating that the sword met the highest standards of the era. Think of it as a medieval certification of excellence, a signal that this weapon could be trusted in battle. Interestingly, not all inscriptions are authentic. Archaeologists have discovered imitations with misspelled or crudely stamped names, suggesting that the Ulfberht brand was so revered that others tried to capitalize on its reputation. True Ulfberht swords were rare, expensive, and reserved for nobles, warriors, and kings. Modern blacksmiths have tried to recreate the Ulfberht steel using traditional methods. Richard Ferrer, a master bladesmith, spent weeks meticulously forging a sword using medieval techniques. He described it as the most challenging task of my life. Even with modern knowledge, replicating the carbon content, purity, and flexibility of the original swords proved incredibly difficult. Tiny inclusions like carbon nanotube structures, which enhance strength and resilience, were found in the original blades, a feature previously thought to be exclusive to modern metallurgical science. How could Viking smiths, with relatively simple tools and knowledge, achieve this? The answer remains elusive. Beyond the science, there is a cultural and symbolic significance to the Ulfberht swords. In a time when Europe was fragmented and battles were brutal and unforgiving, a sword like this was more than a weapon. It was a status symbol, a talisman, and a declaration of power. Owning a Ulfberht sword meant prestige, influence, and authority. Warriors who wielded these blades were seen as elite, almost superhuman in their prowess. Legends grew around them. Some say a true Ulfberht sword could cut through a helmet and shield in a single strike, a feat that would have been impossible for ordinary blades. The swords also hint at a sophisticated network of trade and communication. Analysis of the metallurgical composition shows that the iron may have originated from specific lead deposits in Germany, yet Ulfberht swords are found as far away as Russia and the British Isles. This suggests that the Vikings were not merely raiders. They were part of an intricate web of commerce, technology exchange, and cultural interaction spanning thousands of miles. Each sword carries a story of human ingenuity, travel, and ambition, connecting distant lands in a way rarely acknowledged in mainstream history. Archaeological discoveries further deepen the mystery. Ulfberht swords are often found in burial sites, suggesting their symbolic importance even after death. Some graves contain weapons so exquisitely preserved that they could still be wielded today. Others are found in hoards, intentionally buried or hidden, hinting at rituals or a desire to protect these precious objects. The combination of practicality, artistry, and legend elevates the Ulfberht from mere weapon to historical icon, a testament to what humans were capable of achieving even in the so-called Dark Ages. The story doesn't end there. Modern research continues to uncover surprising details. For instance, metallurgists have found variations in carbon content and alloying techniques across different Ulfberht swords, indicating that each smith may have had a unique method or secret recipe. Some blades show extraordinary hardness at the edges, with softer, more flexible cores, a technique still used in high-end swordmaking today. This level of craftsmanship implies not only skill, but also deep understanding of materials science, centuries ahead of its time. And then there's the mystery of the people behind these swords. Who was Ulfberht? Was it a single master swordsmith, a family, or a guild? The truth is lost to history, yet the blades themselves speak across centuries, whispering tales of courage, innovation, and ambition. They embody the tension between legend and reality, science and myth. Each Ulfberht sword is a bridge connecting us to a world where technology, artistry, and human determination converged in ways that continue to astonish us today. So next time you think of the Vikings, don't just imagine raiders in longboats. Picture the sparks flying in dimly lit workshops, the rhythmic pounding of hammer on steel, and the creation of swords so advanced they could have belonged to the future. Ulfberht swords weren't just weapons, they were marvels of engineering, symbols of status, and echoes of human genius. They remind us that history is not always what we think it is. Sometimes it's more brilliant, more complex, and far more mysterious than we can imagine. Imagine the cradle of civilization, Eastern Anatolia, around 3300 BCE, long before pyramids rose in Egypt. Before written language was widespread, a small city flourished, Arslan-Tepe. Here, archaeologists unearthed 9 extraordinary swords and daggers inside an ancient mud-brick palace. These were not mere ceremonial pieces. Each measured between 45 to 60 centimeters, featuring defined grips, guards, and double-edged designs. Crafted from arsenical copper, an alloy of copper and arsenic, these blades were functional weapons, ready for war, not just decoration. 3 even featured silver inlays, signaling ownership by someone of extraordinary status, perhaps a chief, priest, or early ruler. Arslan-Tepe wasn't just a city. It was a pioneering urban center, with organized administration, storage facilities, and a central palace. And at the heart of this ancient world lay swords, symbols of power, identity, and hierarchy. Until this discovery, historians believed swords emerged around 1600 BCE, but Arslan-Tepe pushed that timeline back over 1,000 years. These early warriors understood that a sword could command respect, project authority, and establish social order. They were the prototypes of the military and political tools that would shape civilizations for millennia. Fast forward 2,200 years to China, to the Sword of Goujian, preserved perfectly for over 2 millennia. Archaeologists were stunned. Buried in damp conditions, the blade exhibited no rust and remained razor-sharp. This was no accident. Its airtight wooden scabbard, combined with a unique metallurgical design, preserved the blade. The sword's high copper alloy gave flexibility, while tin-laced edges ensured hardness. But the true marvel was the sulfur-based chemical coating, forming a molecular barrier against corrosion. Black rhombic patterns adorned both sides. The hilt was inlaid with turquoise, wrapped in silk, and the pommel bore 11 concentric circles. Ancient inscriptions revealed it belonged to King Gujian of Yue, a ruler known for resilience, strategy, and military genius. When tested, the sword effortlessly sliced through stacks of paper, 2,000 years after it was forged. In Chinese folklore, the Gujian, the gentleman of weapons, symbolizes elegance, honor, and divine authority. The craftsmanship of Gujian's sword was centuries ahead of contemporary metallurgy, a testament to the advanced technology of the Chu and Yue states long before the rest of the world caught up. The sword's preservation astonished experts worldwide, and even a small crack in 1994 caused shockwaves in the historical community, emphasizing its delicate yet enduring perfection. Meanwhile, in Japan, a sword unlike any other was discovered, the seven-branched sword, or Nanatsu Saya no Tachi. Unlike standard battlefield weapons, this sword featured three branch-like protrusions on each side, resembling a tree more than a blade. Forged from wrought iron and intricately inlaid with gold, it was not meant for war, but ceremony and diplomacy. The inscription embedded in gold revealed it was a gift from the Crown Prince of Ba, an ancient Korean kingdom, to the king of early Japan. Its purpose remains debated. Some historians see it as subordination, others as a bond of equality. Creating this sword required extraordinary craftsmanship. The iron branches had to be folded repeatedly, forged carefully to prevent cracking, and shaped into delicate symbolic extensions. Today, only replicas are displayed. The original is safeguarded as a sacred artifact, a sword meant to cut through time, not flesh. Next, envision Tuscany, Italy, in the 12th century. In a circular chapel surrounded by rolling hills, an iron sword protrudes from a solid stone. This is the sword of San Galgano, a 12th century knight whose life transformed after visions of the archangel Michael. The legend tells us that Galgano, once arrogant and violent, drove his sword into the stone, declaring he would forsake violence. Centuries later, the sword remains embedded in rock, scientifically confirmed to date back to the 12th century. Radar scans beneath the stone revealed a possible tomb, and the sword is now preserved inside Montepi Chapel. This sword is more than relic. It's a story of faith, redemption, and the power of symbol over brute force. Finally, let us examine the Nebra sky disk and its associated swords. Discovered in Germany in 1999, the Nebra sky disk was initially hailed as the world's oldest depiction of the cosmos. Buried alongside ceremonial swords and axes, it suggested ancient people tracked celestial cycles with precision. But recent research cast doubts. The disk may be 1,000 years younger than originally thought, aligning it with the Iron Age rather than the Bronze Age. This calls into question the associated swords' authenticity. Were they Iron Age copies, modern fabrications, or genuine Bronze Age artifacts? The controversy highlights a fundamental challenge in archaeology. When context is lost, extraordinary artifacts become puzzles without definitive answers. The swords, alongside the Nebra disk, whether authentic or misdated, remind us that human fascination with the stars and the cosmos is ancient and enduring. Across these artifacts, from Arslantepe to Gujian, from Japan to Italy, from Nebra, one theme emerges. The sword is never merely a weapon. It is a symbol of power, culture, technological innovation, and human aspiration. Each blade tells a story of ingenuity, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. They reflect not just warfare, but diplomacy, art, and the human desire to leave a legacy that transcends time. From the first metallurgical experiments in Anatolia to the ceremonial precision of Gujian, from the diplomatic elegance of the seven-branch sword to the sacred symbolism of San Galgano, these blades embody centuries of human achievement and mystery. And even when controversy clouds interpretation, as with the Nebra sky disk, the swords continue to challenge our understanding of history, pushing us to ask deeper questions about what humans were capable of long before we thought we knew. Each sword is a bridge, connecting civilizations, connecting past to present, and reminding us that the extraordinary often lies hidden beneath the ordinary, waiting for those who seek it to reveal its secrets.